The rain fell in heavy sheets over the small Ohio town, streaking down the windows of the Lincoln County Animal Shelter. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed and flickered, casting a harsh glow over the rows of kennels. At the far end, behind a reinforced chain-link fence, the notorious German shepherd known as Ranger paced in a frenzy. His coat was thick and matted, a patchwork of scars marking battles both known and whispered about. Staff dared not enter his enclosure without gloves, a shield, and prayers. Ranger's reputation was legendary: bites, destroyed kennels, frightened volunteers. The word around town was clear: he was untamable. On this particular Thursday morning, the air inside the shelter felt heavier than usual. The metallic scent of fear clung to the walls, and the sound of Ranger's growls reverberated off the concrete floors. He rounded his cage like a predator pacing a jungle clearing, ears flat against his head, teeth bared. Every snap of his jaw seemed to echo through the shelter, a warning to any who dared meet his gaze. A young volunteer, barely 17, fumbled with the gate latch, trembling. One wrong move and she could lose a finger or worse. "Don't even think about it," Lisa, the shelter director, Martha Jenkins, warned. Her voice carried authority, but it was laced with exhaustion. "He's not just aggressive. He's broken. Nobody can touch him." Lisa flinched as Ranger lunged at her gloves through the bars. A warning bite that left an angry red mark. She yelped and stepped back, heart racing. Ranger's amber eyes glinted with a terrifying intelligence, and for a moment, it seemed as if he could read her fear. Then, the door creaked open and a man stepped inside. Not a volunteer, not the usual animal control officer. A man in army fatigues, boots caked with mud, and a calmness that seemed almost unreal in the chaos of the shelter. David Harper had returned home just a month earlier after 3 tours overseas. The weight of battle and loss hung subtly in the way he moved, but there was a quiet strength in his posture, a kind of authority that wasn't shouted, it was earned. "Who's this?" Lisa whispered, stepping behind Martha. "He's one of our last hopes," Martha muttered, though even she didn't seem convinced. Harper's eyes locked on Ranger, and the growling dog immediately stiffened. The air between them seemed to thrum, almost electrically. Ranger's lips curled, teeth flashing. He barked, low and menacing, a sound that made Lisa flinch again. Most people would have turned, or even thrown up their hands in surrender. Not Harper. He crouched, keeping his movements deliberate, slow, and calm. "Easy, boy," Harper said softly, his voice carrying over the cage but without a hint of fear. "I'm not here to hurt you." The room fell silent except for the storm outside and the occasional whimper of a frightened shelter dog in the next kennel. Ranger growled, a sound that shook the bars, but something in Harper's presence made him hesitate. He circled, eyes darting, muscles taut like coiled springs, but he did not lunge. "Do not try this," Martha hissed under her breath. She had seen dozens of experts fail with Ranger, often with blood on their hands. But Harper remained still, even as Ranger snapped and barked, his movements sharp and unpredictable. Then, in a moment that seemed to stretch for eternity, Harper extended a hand, not aggressively, not fast, just slowly, palm open and low. Ranger froze, the growl lowering to a cautious rumble. Staff watched with bated breath as the dog's ears twitched, eyes narrowing, but he didn't attack. He merely stared. A lightning flash illuminated the shelter through the rain-streaked windows, and for just a second, Ranger's amber eyes softened, almost imperceptibly. Then, as quickly as it came, the softness vanished. He snapped back into his wild persona, baring teeth, muscles tensing. Harper didn't flinch. Instead, he whispered something inaudible. Ranger tilted his head, almost curious. Then, like a flash, he lunged not at Harper, but at the empty space near him, teeth snapping at nothing. The tension in the room exploded, every staff member frozen. Harper's heart pounded in sync with the dog's chaotic rhythm, but his stance did not waver. Finally, Ranger retreated, pacing back and forth, low growls still vibrating through his chest. Harper remained where he was, hands still extended, eyes locked on the animal. The shelter fell silent, and in that silence, an unspoken question hung in the air. Could a veteran, scarred by war and tempered by patience, succeed where everyone else had failed? And even more pressingly, would Ranger ever let him in? Suspense gripped the room as Ranger's amber gaze followed Harper's every move. The story of taming the untamable had just begun. The following morning, the rain had turned to a persistent drizzle, mist curling over the shelter's yard. Ranger was already pacing inside his kennel. his amber eyes fixed on the door as if he sensed something in the air, something different. The volunteers had come and gone, leaving the usual smells of disinfectant, kibble, and fear lingering in the air. But today, Harper was back. He entered the kennel area quietly, his boots leaving faint impressions on the wet concrete. Every step he took was deliberate, measured, almost ritualistic. Ranger immediately noticed, ears twitching, teeth flashing in a warning snarl. He lunged against the bars, a blur of muscle and aggression, but Harper did not flinch. He stopped a few feet away, crouching low in a stance that seemed to say, "I see you, but I am not your enemy." "Easy," Harper said again, voice low and calm, carrying a strange authority that the room felt in its chest. "I just want to know you." The shelter director, Martha, watched from the doorway, arms crossed and skepticism etched into her face. "He's gonna bite you," she muttered, though her voice betrayed a mix of awe and fear. Nobody has gotten this far." Harper didn't respond. Instead, he slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn chew toy, tossing it lightly toward Ranger. The dog froze mid-pace, his muscles coiled like springs. He growled, low and threatening, yet his eyes betrayed curiosity. Slowly, Ranger inched forward, sniffing at the toy without taking it. Harper's hand remained low, open, inviting, but non-threatening. It was the first real test, the moment between instinct and trust. Harper had studied Ranger for hours the previous day, noting every flick of the ears, every tension in his shoulders, every blink of his eyes. He knew that one wrong move could trigger the full force of Ranger's aggression. But he also knew that patience, consistency, and respect might be stronger than fear. "Good boy," Harper said softly. The words barely left his lips, but Ranger's head tilted slightly, ears pricking. Then, as if testing the rules, Ranger lunged short, sharp, teeth flashing inches from Harper's sleeve. The veteran remained perfectly still, eyes locked with the dog's. He exhaled slowly, letting Ranger's energy collide with his presence and dissipate. The tension in the room was palpable. Volunteers and staff held their breath, ready to intervene, ready to react to the inevitable disaster. But it didn't come. Ranger snarled, circled, and then, in a moment of hesitation, paused. His gaze flicked to Harper's face, as if assessing, calculating. Harper, sensing the shift, lowered his hand slightly, letting the dog make the next move. Minutes passed. The storm outside intensified, rain lashing the windows and wind rattling the roof. Inside, it was just Harper and Ranger, a battle of wills without violence, a negotiation without words. Slowly, Ranger inched closer to Harper, tentative, testing boundaries. He sniffed Harper's sleeve again, then, shockingly, allowed a single finger to brush his fur. The touch was brief, fleeting barely a second, but it sent a ripple through the shelter. Martha's jaw dropped. I can't believe it," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Lisa, the young volunteer, wiped tears from her eyes. "He's letting him?" Harper didn't smile, didn't celebrate. He simply stayed still, letting Ranger retreat back a step, keeping the fragile trust intact. The dog growled softly, a sound that now carried uncertainty rather than pure rage. Harper's heart raced not from fear, but from understanding. This was progress, a single moment in a long road that could still end in failure. But just as the room began to relax, Ranger suddenly snapped. With a ferocious bark, he lunged at the empty space beside Harper, teeth clashing against air. Volunteers jumped back, fear surging again. Harper's hand remained steady, his voice calm. "It's okay, Ranger. I'm here." The dog froze mid-lunge, eyes locking on Harper's. Slowly, he sank to his haunches, hackles lowering just a fraction. The moment was brief, a fragile balance between trust and instinct, but it was enough to ignite hope. Martha exhaled, trembling. I don't know what to say," she murmured. Nobody has ever gotten this close." Harper simply nodded, eyes never leaving Ranger. "He's listening," he said quietly. "He's learning." Ranger let out a low, uncertain whine, and for the first time, it didn't sound threatening. It sounded tentative, almost curious. Harper reached forward again, just an inch this time, and Ranger didn't flinch. The suspense in the room was suffocating. Could this fragile trust survive the next challenge? Could Harper truly reach the heart of a dog who had been broken by fear, pain, and neglect? Or would one mistake shatter everything, leaving Ranger as untamed and dangerous as ever? The answer hung in the air, unspoken. As rain pounded the shelter roof, a question no one could yet answer. Days blurred into a week, and the shelter's routine remained tense. Ranger was still a creature of chaos and instinct, pacing his kennel, ears flicking at every sound, teeth bared to anyone who came too close. Yet there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere whenever David Harper entered the room. The other dogs quieted, volunteers held their breath, and even Ranger's growls seemed less violent, more measured, as though testing Harper, gauging him. Harper returned every morning, armed with nothing but patience, a few toys, and the quiet authority of a man who had seen far worse than a wild animal. He spent hours observing Ranger, noting the flick of his tail, the shift in weight, the barely perceptible signals of anxiety or curiosity. Harper understood instinct. He had seen it in the battlefield. In moments when lives hung in the balance, and he recognized it in Ranger. Today, Harper carried something different, a small ball, scuffed and worn, a relic from the shelter's past attempts to entertain the dog. He knelt outside Ranger's enclosure, holding it at chest height, and spoke in the same low, soothing voice he had used since the first encounter. "See this?" Harper said gently. "No tricks, no threats, just a ball. You want it. You can have it, but only if you choose." Ranger froze, head tilting slightly, eyes narrowing. The instinct to snarl wired with curiosity. Slowly, he inched forward, the sound of his claws clicking against concrete echoing through the quiet shelter. Harper's hand remained steady, palm open, offering no sudden movements. Tentatively, Ranger sniffed the ball. His hackles were still raised, body coiled with tension, but he did not snap. Harper held his breath. 1 inch, 2 inches. Ranger's amber eyes flicked to Harper, then back to the ball. In a heartbeat, he nudged it slightly with his nose. Harper didn't move. He let Ranger decide. Then, astonishingly, Ranger touched it again, this time more firmly, nudging it closer to the bars, testing the space between him and Harper. The room seemed to exhale collectively. Lisa, the young volunteer, whispered, He's playing." But Ranger was cautious. He would paw at the ball, growl softly, then retreat, pacing like a king in a territory he still didn't trust fully. Harper mirrored him, slow movements, calm energy, letting the dog take the lead. Hours passed in this delicate dance. Each touch of the ball, each hesitant nudge, was a victory. Each retreat a reminder of the fragile nature of trust. By mid-afternoon, something incredible happened. Ranger rolled the ball toward Harper's hand, halting just inches from it. Harper extended a finger and, with a trembling pause, let it brush the ball. The contact was electric, tense, charged, a connection neither human nor dog had experienced before in this setting. Ranger's growl faded into a low whine of curiosity. He didn't bite. He didn't flee. He simply stared at Harper, waiting, considering, testing. Harper spoke softly. "That's it. Good boy. You're safe." His voice was calm, unwavering, a lifeline thrown across the chasm of fear and mistrust that had defined Ranger's life. It was the first real breakthrough. The dog that had once lunged at everyone, that had destroyed kennels and terrified volunteers, was beginning to accept Harper's presence. But progress came with its own tension. Harper knew one wrong move could erase it all. He didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. He stayed crouched, eyes on Ranger, every muscle ready, every sense alert. The shelter staff watched in stunned silence. "I can't believe it," Martha muttered under her breath. "I've never seen anything like this." Volunteers whispered among themselves, some teary-eyed, as they witnessed the impossible. Ranger, the untamable, choosing to trust someone, even just for a moment. Then, without warning, Ranger stiffened. His ears shot forward, body coiling. A shadow passed across the wall outside the window, a stray cat, the wind, or something else. Harper didn't flinch. He had learned patience from the battlefield, and he understood fear from years of training and loss. Slowly, he held his hand steady, waited, and let Ranger decide. The dog barked once sharp, tense, but did not attack. Instead, he nudged the ball again, closer this time, then sat, his tail flicking cautiously. Harper exhaled slowly. The breakthrough was real, but fragile. Ranger had allowed connection, chosen trust over instinct for a fleeting, precious moment, but he was still wild, still untamed, still unpredictable. Suspense lingered like the storm outside. Could this fragile bond survive the next challenge? Could Harper truly guide Ranger from chaos into trust? Or would the dog's violent instincts reassert themselves, shattering weeks of patient progress in an instant? The first step had been taken, but the path ahead was long, uncertain, and filled with danger, not just for Ranger, but for Harper as well. The night had arrived like a predator stalking the town. Outside the shelter, wind tore through the trees, rattling the corrugated roof, while rain pounded against the windows in relentless sheets. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting long shadows that danced across the concrete floors. Ranger was already on edge, pacing his kennel in wide, erratic circles, teeth flashing. Ears pinned back, thunder rolled overhead like distant artillery, shaking the shelter's foundations. Harper had been called urgently by the shelter staff. Ranger had never reacted violently to storms before except for tonight. The dog was in full panic, smashing against the reinforced cage, barking and growling with a ferocity that sent shivers down the spines of the volunteers. It was chaos incarnate, a raw display of fear meeting aggression. Harper arrived, boots splashing in the muddy puddles outside, rain dripping from his shoulders, and paused at the kennel door. He studied Ranger's body language, tense, coiled muscles, hackles raised, eyes wide with terror. This was no ordinary aggression. It was fear writ large, a storm inside the dog, matching the storm outside. "Easy, Ranger," Harper called softly, voice steady but commanding. The dog froze for a fraction of a second, then barked, a deafening sound that reverberated through the shelter. Harper ignored the barking, crouching slowly, deliberately, keeping his eyes locked on the dog's amber gaze. The volunteers held their breath, some stepping back, fearing what might come next. A wrong movement, a sudden gesture, could provoke an attack. Harper knew it, too. But he also knew that fear could be met with patience, that chaos could be met with calm. He took a slow step closer. Ranger lunged, but not at Harper. He lunged at the cage wall beside him, teeth raking metal, a display of raw panic. Harper exhaled slowly, a single, controlled breath, and spoke again. "I'm here. You're safe," his hand extended cautiously, just inches from the cage. Ranger froze mid-bark, hackles raised, every muscle taut. Harper's eyes never left the dog's. He knew this moment was crucial. One wrong move and weeks of fragile trust could be destroyed in an instant. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the shelter in stark white. For a brief second, Harper saw it, Ranger's eyes, wide and fearful, flicking between the thunder, the shadows, and Harper himself. In that instant, Harper made a choice. He stepped closer, crouching low to the ground, speaking softly, letting the dog's panic wash over him without reaction. "Come on, Ranger. I'm not going anywhere," Harper murmured. His calmness was deliberate, almost defiant, a shield against the storm raging in the dog and outside. Ranger's growls softened into a low rumble, and for the first time that night, he hesitated. The volunteers gasped. Lisa whispered, He's listening." But Ranger's fear was not gone. Every roll of thunder sent him skittering across the kennel. Every shadow made his hackles rise again. Harper remained steady, moving slowly, extending his hand inch by inch, never forcing contact, never showing fear. Minutes felt like hours. Ranger lunged again, teeth snapping just inches from Harper's sleeve. But Harper didn't flinch. He let the dog's energy collide with his calm presence, grounding him. Slowly, Ranger sank to his haunches, chest heaving, eyes wide but no longer filled solely with aggression. He whimpered a low, trembling sound and Harper reached forward, allowing a single finger to brush the top of his head. The room exhaled collectively. A breakthrough had been made, but it was fragile, tenuous. Ranger's wild instincts had not vanished. They were still there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the next flash of lightning, the next threat. Yet, for a fleeting moment, trust had emerged. Harper held his ground, whispering softly, "It's okay, Ranger. You're safe. I'm not leaving." The dog remained tense, but the growls subsided into short, uncertain whines. He stayed where he was, eyes locked on Harper, as if making a silent promise. Outside, the storm began to ease slightly, but inside the shelter, a storm of a different kind had raged and partially calmed. Harper knew this night was only the beginning. Ranger's fear had nearly consumed him, but the veteran's patience had held. The fragile bond between man and dog had been tested in a crucible of panic and instinct hand. Against all odds, it had survived. Yet suspense lingered like a shadow. Would Ranger ever fully trust? Could Harper maintain control when the unpredictable wildness of the dog collided with the chaos of the outside world? Or would one night, one misstep, destroy the fragile progress they had made? The night ended with Ranger finally lying down on the cold concrete, eyes never leaving Harper. It was a victory, but only a small one. The journey to taming the untamable had just begun. The sun rose over Lincoln County with a tentative warmth, glinting off the wet asphalt outside the shelter. Inside, a remarkable transformation had begun to unfold. Ranger, the once untamable German shepherd, now moved through the kennel with a hesitant confidence. His amber eyes, once sharp with unfiltered aggression, now held curiosity. Still wary, still powerful, he had begun to show glimpses of something extraordinary: trust. David Harper arrived as usual, his army boots leaving faint impressions in the damp floor. In his hand, he carried nothing but a leash and his calm authority. He crouched beside Ranger's enclosure, speaking softly in the low, measured tones that had started to bridge the vast gap between fear and loyalty. "Ready for a walk?" Harper asked quietly. Ranger's ears flicked, his body tensing for a moment before he stepped closer. He nudged Harper's hand with his nose, a small gesture, but monumental. Harper smiled faintly, unclipped the leash from the hook inside the kennel, and slowly approached. Ranger didn't resist. Instead, he allowed Harper to slide the leash over his neck. The small, mundane act carried enormous weight. The untouchable had let someone guide him willingly. Outside, the world was unpredictable. Cars passed by, birds scattered, and the wind shifted, carrying scents of the surrounding woods. Harper led Ranger carefully, step by step, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. The dog's muscles twitched, his ears pivoted constantly, and his tail flicked in measured intervals. He was still wild, still cautious, but the leash between them symbolized the fragile thread of trust they were weaving. Harper's eyes never left Ranger. "Good boy," he murmured, praising the dog for every calm movement. Ranger's response was subtle, a soft whine, a tentative glance, a paw brushing Harper's leg. It was a language neither spoken nor written, a quiet understanding that had taken weeks to build. For the first time, the shelter volunteers saw the dog in a different light. Lisa, watching from the fence, whispered, "He's different. He's like a completely new dog." Even Martha, hardened by years of working with untrainable animals, admitted softly, "I've never seen anything like it." He's responding to him, but the bond was tested almost immediately. A squirrel darted across the parking lot, snapping Ranger into alert. His hackles rose, teeth flashing, instincts surging like a tide. Harper froze, heart pounding not in fear, but in calculation. He knew that one sudden move could unravel everything. "Stay," Harper commanded, his voice low but firm. Ranger's body tensed, muscles coiled to spring, but then, almost impossibly, he obeyed. The squirrel vanished into the trees, and Ranger's tension eased. Harper allowed himself a slow exhale, the first hint of triumph glinting in his eyes. Days turned into weeks, and the bond strengthened. Harper and Ranger trained outside the shelter, practicing basic commands and gradually increasing complexity. Ranger began to show playful behavior, chasing a ball under Harper's supervision, rolling in the grass, even allowing Harper to scratch behind his ears, a gesture of trust the dog had never offered before. Yet Harper knew that the dog's wild instincts were never far from the surface. Each walk, each interaction was a delicate negotiation, a test of patience and understanding. The slightest misstep could trigger aggression, a reminder that Ranger's untamed nature was still part of him. One afternoon, Harper decided it was time to test Ranger outside the controlled environment of the shelter. He led the dog along a quiet trail behind the facility, surrounded by dense woods and the sounds of wildlife. Ranger's eyes flicked constantly, alert to every scent and movement. He obeyed commands, stayed close, but Harper could feel the tension in his muscles, the simmering energy of a predator held in check. As they walked, Harper spoke softly, recounting stories from his time in the military, tales of discipline and survival. Ranger listened in his own way, ears flicking, body relaxed slightly with each word. It was an unexpected bond, forged not through fear or dominance, but through patience, understanding, and mutual respect. Yet suspense lingered. Harper knew that the true test was still ahead. Could Ranger maintain this loyalty and control in a situation far more chaotic than a quiet trail? Could the wild instincts that had defined him for years be tempered enough to allow trust to survive in the real world? The walk ended at a clearing in the woods. Ranger lay down at Harper's feet, tail wagging cautiously, eyes bright but alert. Harper knelt beside him, hand resting lightly on his back. For the first time, they were partners, not veteran and animal, not rescuer and rescued, but to beings bound by a fragile, powerful trust. But as Harper scanned the tree line, he noticed movement, something lurking in the shadows. Ranger's ears twitched, His body stiffened and Harper's pulse quickened. The test was not over. The wild world outside the shelter was unpredictable, and Ranger's true nature had yet to face it fully. Suspense gripped the scene. Would Ranger rise to the challenge, proving the bond real? Or would the instincts of a lifetime threaten to undo everything they had built? The day had begun like any other, with Harper leading Ranger along the familiar trails behind the shelter. Birds chirped tentatively in the early morning sun, and the air was crisp with the scent of damp earth and pine. Ranger walked close, leash slack, but muscles coiled, alert to every rustle in the underbrush. The bond between man and dog had strengthened, but Harper knew better than to let familiarity breed complacency. Ranger's instincts were still sharp, wild, and unpredictable. Suddenly, a shout pierced the calm. A child, no more than 7, had wandered far into the woods, chasing a ball that had bounced beyond sight. Harper's blood ran cold. Ranger reacted immediately, muscles tensing like springs. His hackles rose, ears pricked, and his low growl rumbled through the forest like distant thunder. "Ranger, stay calm," Harper shouted, though his voice trembled with urgency. The dog's eyes flicked to him, but Harper knew instinct might override obedience. Ranger's protective nature surged, yet the question remained, would he listen? Or would panic and fear take over? Harper took off at a run, Ranger beside him. Leash slack, but their bond tested by the chaos unfolding. The child's small figure came into view, frozen in fear as a loose, aggressive dog emerged from the underbrush, growling and teeth bared. Ranger halted just a few feet away, muscles taut, his amber eyes locking on the threat. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Harper called again, low and steady, "Ranger, now." The German shepherd leapt not at the child, but toward the intruder. The other dog snapped and lunged, teeth meeting teeth in a flurry of snarls and tension. Ranger positioned himself between the child and the aggressor, body tense and imposing, growl vibrating through the clearing. Harper watched, pulse pounding, as Ranger held the line. Every instinct, every ounce of his former wildness had transformed into disciplined loyalty. The aggressor backed away slowly, growling but defeated by Ranger's sheer presence. Ranger did not move from his position, eyes unwavering, muscles ready to strike again if needed. Harper knelt beside the trembling child, whispering soothing words, and gently placed a hand on Ranger's side. The dog's body remained rigid, but the growl subsided into a low, controlled rumble. The volunteers and passers-by who had arrived on the scene later described it as surreal, a wild, untrainable dog, once feared by all, now acting with precision and loyalty to protect the life. Ranger, the untamable, had chosen instinct guided by trust over instinct guided by chaos. Harper unclipped the leash slowly, letting Ranger approach the child. The dog sniffed cautiously, tail flicking, and then nudged the child gently with his nose, a gesture of reassurance. Harper exhaled deeply, feeling a mix of relief and pride. The life or death test had been passed, but the weight of the experience lingered. As they walked back toward the shelter, Harper spoke softly to Ranger, recounting the moment with calm authority. "That's it, Ranger. You kept the child safe. You listened. You chose to protect, not panic." The dog's ears twitched, and he stayed close, walking in step with Harper, muscles finally relaxing, but still ready. The shelter director, Martha, met them at the gate, eyes wide. I've never seen anything like that," she said, voice trembling. He saved a life. Your dog, he's incredible." Harper didn't answer immediately. His thoughts were already shifting forward. He had always known Ranger was special, but this event crystallized it. The bond they had forged through patience, understanding, and respect had transformed a wild animal into a guardian, a partner capable of heroism. Yet even in victory, Harper knew the danger was not over. Ranger's wild instincts were still part of him, ever present beneath the surface. The incident had proven their bond, but it also hinted at the challenges ahead. Harper realized that trust and discipline could save lives, but only if constantly nurtured and tested. That night, as Ranger lay at Harper's feet in the shelter, chest rising and falling with controlled breaths, Harper ran his hand along the dog's back, reflecting on the day. The image of Ranger, standing firm against a threat, refusing to panic, stayed with him. It was more than training. It was a transformation, a turning point that no one could have predicted. But suspense lingered. Harper's mind drifted to the future. How far could this bond go? Could Ranger handle the unpredictability of life beyond the controlled environment of the shelter? And would the instincts that had once made him untamable eventually collide with the world? in ways neither could anticipate. For now, though, Harper allowed himself a quiet moment of triumph. Ranger had faced the ultimate test and passed, and in that, the veteran and his dog had proven something more profound, that trust forged in patience could conquer fear, even in a creature built for chaos. By the time autumn painted the small Ohio town in shades of gold and amber, Ranger had become something almost unimaginable. The once feared German shepherd, untouchable and wild, now walked calmly beside David Harper on the shelter grounds. Volunteers and visitors stared in awe as the dog responded flawlessly to commands, tail flicking in measured, controlled movements rather than twitching with unchecked aggression. Word of Ranger's transformation spread quickly through the local community. A video Harper had recorded of Ranger saving the child in the woods went viral, capturing the imagination of animal lovers, dog trainers, and even news outlets. People couldn't believe it. The wild, untrainable dog, feared by all who had encountered him, had become a hero. But fame was not the focus for Harper. The real transformation was deeper, more personal, more profound. Each day, Harper trained Ranger further, honing obedience, building confidence, and testing boundaries. The bond they shared had evolved into something remarkable, a partnership built on mutual trust, respect, and understanding. Ranger was no longer just a dog. He was a living testament to the power of patience and consistency. Ranger's playful side began to emerge. He chased balls with precision, rolled in the grass without fear, and even allowed Harper to scratch behind his ears or rub his chest gestures he would have once attacked anyone for. Yet Harper never let the dog forget his wild instincts. Every walk, every command, every test was designed to reinforce that the loyalty and trust were choices, not guarantees. It was during one of these walks that Harper reflected on their shared journey. "You've come a long way, boy," he murmured, kneeling to meet Ranger's eyes. The dog nuzzled him gently, a silent acknowledgement of their bond. Harper thought back to the early days, the growls, the lunges, the fear. It seemed almost impossible now that they had arrived here, standing together in quiet harmony. Despite the progress, Harper knew the challenges weren't over. Ranger had a history, scars that ran deeper than fur and flesh. His wild instincts could be triggered at any moment, a reminder that trust had to be maintained, not assumed. The veteran had seen the consequences of unpredictability in his own life. He understood that even the strongest bonds could be tested by unforeseen circumstances. The ultimate test came unexpectedly. A representative from a professional canine training organization contacted Harper. After seeing Ranger's story online, they offered to bring Ranger into their program, promising advanced training, national exposure, and even opportunities for Ranger to become a working dog for police or rescue operations. It was an honor, a chance for Ranger to prove his abilities on a larger stage, but it came with a difficult choice. Harper would have to part with the dog who had saved him in more ways than one. Harper wrestled with the decision. He had trained Ranger with care, rebuilt his trust from nothing, had formed a bond stronger than most people could understand. The idea of handing him over to strangers, even experts, filled him with dread. Yet he knew that Ranger's potential was immense, that the dog's abilities could save lives and inspire people far beyond their small town. Ranger seemed to sense the tension. He rested his head on Harper's knee, eyes soft but alert. Harper whispered, "We'll figure it out, buddy, together." The unspoken connection between them carried reassurance, a reminder that whatever decision came next, it would be guided by trust, not fear. Meanwhile, the town embraced Ranger as a symbol of hope and resilience. Children visited the shelter just to see him, volunteers marveled at his obedience, and local media covered his story extensively. Harper watched quietly, pride swelling in his chest, knowing that every step of this journey from the violent, untouchable beast to the loyal, disciplined companion was a testament to what patience, understanding, and unwavering commitment could achieve. Yet suspense lingered like a shadow. Harper knew that the real world beyond the shelter was unpredictable, and Ranger's past, though healed, was never truly gone. Could the dog handle the pressures of national attention, rigorous training, or dangerous assignments? Could their bond endure the challenges that lay ahead? For now, Harper allowed himself a moment of quiet triumph. Ranger, once feared by all, was no longer defined by his aggression or chaos. He had become something greater, a partner, a protector, a living example of transformation. And though the future held uncertainty, Harper and Ranger were ready to face it together, step by step, challenge by challenge. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting long shadows over the shelter. Harper knelt beside Ranger, brushing a hand across his scarred back. The dog rested his head against Harper's shoulder, eyes bright and attentive. It was a small, intimate victory, a moment of calm before the next storm, the next test, the next chapter of their extraordinary journey. Suspense hung in the air. The bond was strong, but the unthinkable was always possible. Harper knew the next challenge was coming, and when it did, Ranger would have to prove that the transformation was real, permanent, and unbreakable. The national canine competition was unlike anything Harper had ever experienced. Thousands of spectators packed into the arena, cameras flashing, and the air buzzing with anticipation. The stakes were high. This was no ordinary showcase. Ranger, the dog once feared by all, now stood beside Harper, calm yet alert, muscles coiled like a spring, eyes bright with focus. The transformation was on display for the world to see. Harper adjusted Ranger's collar and whispered softly, "We've come a long way, buddy. Let's show them who you really are." Ranger nudged his hand in response, a subtle but profound acknowledgement of their bond. They stepped into the arena, the crowd erupting in applause, unaware of the story behind the dog who had once been untouchable, uncontrollable, feared, and wild. The first events were routine obedience exercises. Ranger executed every command flawlessly, sits, stays, recalls, and precision movements, each performed with the grace and discipline of a veteran canine. The crowd murmured in awe, some even wiping tears from their eyes. Captivated by the story, they could feel through the dog's movements. Harper felt a swell of pride, yet he never let his guard down. Ranger's past instincts were a quiet shadow, waiting for the slightest disruption to erupt. Then came the agility course, a complex web of obstacle, ramps, tunnels, and moving platforms designed to test speed, coordination, and focus under pressure. Harper knew this would push Ranger's instincts to the edge. The whistle blew, and Ranger launched into the course, fluid and precise, yet hyper-aware of every stimulus, the crowd's roar, the flashing cameras, the unpredictable terrain. Harper ran alongside him, a silent partner guiding, but never forcing. Halfway through, the arena lights flickered a brief, disorienting blackout. The crowd gasped, and the arena trembled with uncertainty. Harper's heart skipped a beat, knowing how easily Ranger could panic, how easily the dog's wild instincts could resurface. He called softly, "Focus, Ranger. Stay with me." For a tense moment, it seemed like chaos might return. Ranger froze, ears flat, muscles tight. Then, astonishingly, he recalibrated, leaping through the tunnel and over the hurdles with unwavering focus. Harper exhaled slowly, the tension in the arena thick and palpable. Finally, the last stage of the competition arrived, the simulated rescue. A volunteer, acting as a victim, lay motionless while a hazardous obstacle environment challenged the dog's judgment and loyalty. Harper gave a low command, and Ranger moved with purpose, navigating the complex terrain, ignoring distractions, and locating the victim. Every eye in the arena tracked the German Shepherd with disbelief. This was the same dog who had once attacked anyone who came near. Now a hero performing life-saving maneuvers under extreme pressure. He reached the victim, gently nudged them with his nose, and backed away, signaling Harper. Harper knelt, taking the volunteer's hand, and Ranger settled obediently by his side. The crowd erupted into thunderous applause, some cheering, some standing in silent awe. Harper's chest swelled, but his eyes were only on Ranger. Then, just as they were about to exit the arena, Ranger stiffened. A shadow moved across the edge of the competition stage, a flash of something Harper couldn't identify. Ranger's hackles rose, low growl vibrating through his chest, eyes locked on the unseen threat. Harper's pulse quickened. After everything they had endured together, the unthinkable moment had arrived. The arena fell silent, the crowd unaware of the danger only Harper and Ranger could sense. Harper whispered softly, "We've got this, buddy. Stay with me." Ranger's body tensed, ready for anything, every muscle primed. It was the ultimate test, not obedience, not training, but instinct tempered by trust. Ranger's growl intensified, his amber eyes piercing the shadow. Harper could feel the weight of the moment. One decision, one movement, could define everything. And then, with a surge of precision and control, Ranger moved calm, calculated, fearless. The shadow retreated. Whatever threat it was dissipated, and Ranger relaxed slightly, returning his attention to Harper. A wave of relief and awe swept through the arena. Harper knelt beside Ranger, brushing a hand along his scarred back. Feeling the steady warmth of his trusted companion, they had faced the ultimate test, a public stage, chaos, distraction, and fear, and they had emerged unbroken. Suspense lingered, though, like a shadow at the edge of the light. The world had witnessed Ranger's transformation, but Harper knew the dog's untamed nature was never truly gone. Their journey together wasn't over. Challenges would arise, tests would continue, and the bond between man and dog would always be measured by trust, courage, and loyalty. Harper whispered to Ranger, "You did it. We did it." Ranger nudged his hand, tail flicking gently, a silent affirmation of their unthinkable journey from fear to trust, chaos to heroism. And as they walked off the arena floor, lights flashing and cameras clicking, Harper glanced at the edge of the stage once more. A shadow lingered just beyond the curtain. Ranger's ears twitched. Their story was far from over.